Yo, 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 welcome back to 40 TV with your boy 4O. Today, I decided we're going to throw together a tutorial on iZotope's Ozone mastering plugin suite. So, let's get started. Let me go ahead and close this out real quick. I'm going to disable the Ozone, and I'm going to go ahead and play to the beat that I've thrown together thus far. So, here we go. So pretty cool little beat so far, right? Gonna go ahead and re-enable the iZotope Ozone. Click on the wrench to open up the plugin and get started. First thing you'll notice as soon as you open up the Ozone is that it opens up a bunch of presets, and they're well put together. And if you're in a rush, you can go ahead and definitely browse through them and use one, or dissect what they did with the individual modules by loading one and checking out what the parameters are. I'm going to go ahead and click on cancel. We're going to build our settings from scratch, obviously. You can enable the different modules by these buttons to the left of them. As you can see on the bottom, it lists the modules: Paragraphic, equalizer, mastering reverb, loudness maximizer, multiband harmonic exciter, multiband dynamics, multiband stereo imaging. We're actually going to start with the maximizer first. The first thing that you want to do is go ahead and turn on the DC offset filter. Another thing you'll notice is it's currently bypassed. You can enable it by either unchecking this button or clicking on this area right next to active. Also will bypass it or unbypass the particular module. Enabling the DC offset filter basically fixes any problems you have from outlet power, creating any phase shifting and so forth. Dithering, you want to go ahead and turn this on. What type of dither you set, entirely up to you. It affects the sound very, very minusculely, but you can go ahead and play and set to taste. Mbit plus works fine for me. Your mode, same as dithering, affects the sound very minusculely, but I like intelligent or intelligent too. Your margin dB here, I usually drop it to minus 0.03. Or minus 0.3, I mean. And the reason for that is basically what you're trying to do is make sure that commercial CD players don't distort when playing your track. Next setting that you want to play with is the threshold setting. In order to see anything on the threshold, we have to play the sound, and then we're looking for gain reduction in this column. For this particular track, I found, or this beginning of a track, I found that minus 4 dB sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and play and listen to how it sounds. And while watching the gain reduction meter, I start to lower the threshold, and I notice gain reduction occurring. Somewhere around minus 10.1 look like a good threshold setting for this particular track. I'll go ahead and play the before and after. So this is the after and the before. So already sounding good, right? Let's switch over to the paragraphic equalizer and keep going. First thing we need to do is unbypass this or enable this particular module. Did so by unchecking the bypass right here. Next, you can affect either the stereo image of this track or the mid-side, or the sum and the difference of the track. To do so, you can click on the stereo button right here. By affecting or using the equalizer as a mid-side EQ, it allows you to affect everything that's in your mid, which would be your kick, your bass, your lead vocal, etc., separately from how you EQ your sides. And your sides obviously would be backup vocals, guitars, etc., etc. So, or anything panned to the left and right. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to come here and we're going to look and we're going to set up a bump. And the bump is dependent on your track. I found that the kick hits somewhere around 60 hertz on this track. So we're going to bump it up by 1 dB. So I set a bell to be affected at 60 hertz, raising it by 1 dB. We're going to increase the Q all the way up because we really want a wide Q here. We're also going to bump up one octave above 60 hertz, which would be 120 hertz. We're going to bump that up by 1 dB, increase the Q all the way up, and therefore we are affecting this EQ. We are adding harmonics by EQing within a separate octave or an additional octave from the primary frequency. Another thing we can do to make the speakers really efficient, maybe is come down here to the to 20 hertz and maybe minus 0.5 dB just to make the speakers more efficient. We'll switch over here to the side portion of the EQ, and we want to do two things. First thing we want to do is we want to maybe drop some of this low shelf. So this low shelf setting depends on the track, but let's say 200 hertz as a good default parameter, and we're going to go minus 1 dB. What that's going to do is to bring out a little bit of the bass in the side portion of this mid-side EQ. We also want to increase the highs, so we're going to come over here, and in the high shelf we're going to change this to 8,000 hertz, and we're going to bump it up by 1 dB. You know what, to add a little bit of presence, we'll go back here to the mid. We'll look for a bell curve right here, maybe 3,500 hertz. We'll add 0.5 dBs, and what that's going to affect is the punch of the kick, or the beater that hits the kick of the drum, right? So let me do a little before and after comparison. If you're listening to this on laptop speakers or really cheap headphones, you may not hear a difference, but if you're listening on nice monitors or a nice pair of headphones, you should hear really small differences. And small differences are good because you're not trying to totally change the feeling or the sound of the track. You're just trying to achieve the best sound you can on the widest range of speakers. So here's without and with. So hopefully you're able to discern the difference on your speakers. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the mastering reverb. In the mastering reverb, we want to go ahead and make it active by unchecking the bypass here. You'll notice up at the top you see what I guess is basically an EQ, right? From 20 hertz to 50 hertz, from 7 to 20 kilohertz. And what this is going to do is limit the adding of reverbs to certain frequencies. This middle portion is the frequencies that are being given reverb, and the parts outside of it are not going to be affected. First, what you're going to want to do is set up a room size, and obviously depending on the type of room that you're trying to emulate is going to determine what these settings are, but I'm looking for kind of a small to medium room. I don't want it to be too wide, so maybe drop this down, I don't know, 0.4, 0.5. We can't hear anything yet because we're not playing any of the track. As I play the track, what I'm going to show you, when I click on solo reverb, you'll notice we don't hear anything. And the reason we don't hear anything is we haven't introduced any wet signal of the reverb into the mix. As we increase this, you'll notice you start to hear the reverb, because this is just the reverb signal. Obviously this is going to be, you probably already have reverb on some of your on some of your instruments in your track and so forth, and before I did put this tutorial together, I ended up coming up with 2.5 dBs. Your dry is the volume of your track signal. Obviously you want to leave that at 100. You can play with dampening and pre-delay, which affect how your room interacts with the reflections of the reverb. We're not going to for this track, but definitely feel free. Another thing that we can do while we're soloing this reverb is we can adjust. Hopefully this is not crackling in your ears as it just did in mine in my headphones. But we can adjust this to affect less of the lower end. I don't know, maybe 200 hertz, somewhere around there. If we uncheck this and we listen to it before and after, with and without the reverb, you'll notice that without and with, Another thing I want to point out that you'll notice here in the phase, that by adding some of that mastering reverb, it widened it slightly. Another thing that you want to make sure is that your correlation stays between 0 and +1. If it's between 0 and -1, you're having a phase problem. So that's cool. We added a little bit of mastering reverb, sounding a little bit better. Let's switch over here to the harmonic exciter. This harmonic exciter is basically going to add distortion to different frequency bands in order to make your sound fatter. Distortion is a fun thing to play with, and harmonic exciter is another way to distort your sound, to increase the thickness, the fatness of the sound. You'll notice that this is a 4-band exciter, so you can affect these bands separately. You can also drag these bands to change their default settings, being 20 Hertz to 120, 120 to 2K, 2K to 10K, and 10K to 20K. So really, just going to show you a couple things. You can select each band. When I select the band, you'll notice that this effect shows me that I'm here on this particular band. And this is going to allow me to introduce, this is how much of this excitement is going to happen to the band between 10 and 20K, which really is very airy. If we click on the solo button right here, of course we need to unbypass this, but if we click on the solo button, you'll notice that this is just the airy stuff, maybe some cymbals, etc. So we can really increase this, and I'm trying to see what I set this to, but I think maybe 1.5 for this track, something like that. If you can't get it, you can double click and type in 1.5, press enter. I think on this mid to high band right here, if I unsolo the high band and just the high mid band, you hear from 2K to 10K. What I did was just add maybe 0.5 or something here. You don't want to add too much distortion. You can sometimes add stuff to the low end and low mids, but I find that it really muddies up the track. The delays right here, messing with the delays, I wouldn't really do this for mastering, but the delays, maybe if you're doing sound design, you can adjust these delays from when the excited or distorted sound is happening from the original sound. Can produce some interesting results, but usually not for your final mix. Anyways, let's do a before and after. This is going to be very subtle. If you don't have nice speakers, you're not going to hear it, but trust me, these little differences are going to really be a big deal in the club or wherever your track is being played over really loud volume. So without, with. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's go over to stereo imaging. We'll come back and mess with the multiband compressor or multiband dynamics last. So here in our stereo imaging, it shows you a little phase meter, and this is showing you how wide your track is. You notice this track is not very wide. You also notice that our correlation is happening between 0 and 1. Same thing, as long as it's between 0 and 1, you're in phase. Between 0 and -1, you're not. This is a 4-band stereo imager, so you can affect all the bands individually. Again, if you put your cursor over one of these lines, you can change the width of the band or the frequencies that it's affecting. So for the stereo imaging, I think what I did is I just increased maybe a little bit in the high end. We have to unbypass this, obviously. We're not going to hear anything. I think I went up 0.2, maybe 0.4. Again, you might want to drop down by 0.5 for the lows, the low mids by maybe 0.2. Whenever you drag this selector below 0, you're narrowing that particular field. So between 20 Hertz and 120 Hertz, by dragging this down minus 0.5, I've effectively made the kick, the bass, etc. a lot tighter down the middle. And by increasing the high mids up 0.4, I've effectively spread that particular band that much wider, right? You'll be able to see here when we bypass. Right now it's not bypassed, but I want you to watch this area So right now, let's bypass it, play, and then let's unbypass it. You're not saying it too much, but if you solo one of the bands, yeah, he's still not saying it too much. So really, unfortunately, this track is, again, just a bunch of loops that I threw together. Not too much, nor nothing was really panned beforehand. I did throw on a couple delays on some stuff, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of and obviously by introducing stuff into the harmonic exciter as well as the stereo imaging, it's getting a little bit wider, but not much. So let's leave it where it's at, switch over to multiband dynamics, and let's unbox this. Again, 4 bands, each affected separately. Whenever you click on one, it will load that band's information here. So you can set a threshold for limiting, and then your ratio for that limiting, your compressor, the ratio for compressor, as well as expansion. So first thing we probably want to do is we want to affect the lows. And in order to affect the lows, we're going to change is the ratio of the compressor. You don't want to overdo it here because remember we have a loudness maximizer going on. You've probably compressed the kick already within its own track. So I don't know, maybe 2 to 1, 1.5 to 1, something not too heavy. Threshold of the compressor, again, we're going to look at gain reduction, but we're going to do that after we affect the attack and the release settings of the compressor. To check out those settings, we need to go to this button here and select show. When we select show, you can see the attack of the compressor and the release of the compressor. We want the kick to break through, so there's still some slap in the kick. If your attack is too fast, or the reason it down, but also if your attack is too fast, you're going to lose that the initial hit of the kick. It's all going to sound more compressed. You're not going to get the beater of the drum if it's a live kick, etc., etc. We also want the compressor to release a little bit slowly. These are just generic numbers I threw in, 233, 289. Obviously play with them. It's going to change per sound. Similar to the numbers that I came up with for this track when I first went through it. But obviously you need to listen and adjust while you're playing the track. When I hide this, I can switch back over, play the track, and start to drop the threshold on the compressor. Right now, it looks like we're getting, there we go, about 4 dBs of gain reduction, sometimes, but more or less 4 dBs of gain reduction. We can turn on auto gain compensation, or we can add this back into taste. I like to add stuff back into taste because you may want to boost it more or less depending on the track. So right now, 4.7, maybe 5, somewhere around there. This is if we solo this particular band. This is how we're affecting it. Bypassed. Effect. Let's unsolo and keep moving. So next we're going to affect the low mid band. Again, you want to set this ratio small, 1.5 to 2, something like that. Again, we want to go ahead and sneak over here, increase the attack of our compressor, increase the release. We'll go back. Now we're going to play with the threshold. We can solo this particular band, press spacebar, and as we bring this down, what we're looking for, I don't know, be there 4 dBs of gain reduction. Then we're going to make it up over here, maybe at 4.5 dB back in of for this particular band. We're going to go ahead and unsolo this band and keep moving. Now right here for the mid-highs, our ratio, let's set it to 1.5 maybe. We don't want to compress this stuff too much. We also don't want to drop as much gain. We are again going to slow down the attack, the release. Not too much, maybe even less for the mid. Somewhere like a medium attack like that. We'll go back. We're going to adjust the compressor's threshold. We're going to a little bit less gain reduction. We're going to solo the band too. There we go. Like 3 dB or so. We'll introduce maybe 3.2 back into the mix. One solo. We'll solo the high band. We'll move to the highs from 10K to 20K. Again, maybe 1.5 with a medium release. I mean a medium attack, something like that, with a little bit slower of a release. Switch back over. If you're what my settings were, don't worry, you just want to play with it. You need to understand the differences between a fast attack and a slow attack, and by repeating the song, continually playing it and making these adjustments, you're going to hear it. So right now we have the high band soloed. We're going to adjust the threshold of the compressor. This one maybe 3-4 dB, something like that. There we go. And then we're going to bring that volume back in, maybe 3.5 or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and getting my cell phone was ringing. I'm going to go ahead and stop the track, unsolo here. As you notice, we have now used the whole suite. I'm going to bypass everything with a global bypass right here, this button. I'm going to play the track. This is without what we've done, and then the moment of truth. So should be a significant difference between with and without. Again, without, and now with. All right, so thanks for tuning in. Another episode of 40 TV with your host 40. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, learned a little something. Remember the presets, stuff we entered, not the presets, I'm sorry, all the settings we entered into the different modules of the compressor, of the maximizer, of the reverb. It's going to vary based on each track. I just gave you some settings that worked for this particular track. I also gave you some starting points and things to look. Please continue to play with your tracks, put them on, play the particular scene, and make adjustments. Hear what those adjustments do. Hope to see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, rate, like, favorite, do what you got to do. Thanks a lot. I'm out.